All right. Well, sorry for the late start. My name's Jim Gao. I'm the host of the Grit City Think and Drink. For those of you I haven't seen before, I apologize. Unfortunately, they gave me all the AV equipment. We got in here late because there was a group in before us this time, and they didn't give me a mic, so I didn't find out about it until now. So the speaker's not going to do a skinny bit of good. So if you guys can gather around plenty of space at the tables, and that way Hannah doesn't have to yell at the top with very long. And unfortunately, you get to buy with the background bar noise and the pinball machines, which is all part of practicing teaching. So welcome everybody. Happy fall. Almost, I don't know. Can't say that. Still summer, right? Right, we're hanging on. Thanks for coming tonight. We do have the rest of the year scheduled out and going into 2024. So we'll hope you here every month. So it's the second Tuesday of every month. We have a talk. Our next one, and unfortunately I haven't gotten her title yet, but Kirsten Jenkins at TCC is an Egyptologist and an archaeologist. So I got Linda for research because there was a blurb that came out about a new find that she was working on. So it should be a really interesting talk. So I'm going to say Egypt something. Hopefully that'll be an awesome talk in October. Then we have Danica Miller talking in November, and Matt Harvey was going to be talking about some of his work on the role of police in racial profiling and so on. And I'm doing horrible justice to his work, but I apologize. But I don't have his info yet, so I can't give too much more. So we got all those coming up. And then Ellen Baird, who was supposed to talk earlier this year about her one-person foray into the North Cascades. It's got to come back and give a great storytelling episode about her travel. So hopefully that'll be in January. So just when you're feeling really blah, that will be a really good talk to pull out. So, and then we'll keep going from there. And I want to point out our sponsors, the School of IAS, who is my institution. They help support this and have for the last 5+ years that I've been running the program. The Office of Community Partnerships has ponied up, and the speakers don't know it, but they just signed on to get an honorarium to each of the speakers, starting with Anna. So she gets some dough that she didn't know about yet, as to the rest of the speakers. So that's great. Allows us to bring in some more people from across the board. And the 7Cs for allowing us to host their stuff here. So without further ado, technology. So yeah, hi. I want to give a quick introduction and then we'll get this going. Dr. Emil, and I got to ask you, mention that Abbas was born in Hungary and has studied, taught, and done research in Budapest and in the U.S. She is an assistant professor of economics at UWT. Her work focuses on gender inequalities in education and the labor market and what we can do about it. She studies obstacles in the way of women's career success, such as care duties, a lack of role models and mentorship, institutional culture, and lower aspirations and targets. She studies large data sets from various countries and runs behavioral experiments, which we'll hear about tonight, to look for governmental and business policies that can benefit women and our society as a whole. So it's going to be a really interesting talk. Thank you. Take a big round of applause. Oh, I can, wherever you want to stand, I will point this at you. Okay. How about there? You got it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I hope you can hear me. I don't have a very loud voice to begin with, but I'll try my best. I'm so happy to be here today. Thank you for listening to me talk about my research. I actually wanted to start with about me, but Jim already said some of this, but it does motivate where my research came from. So I was born in Budapest, And then because of my dad's job, we moved to the U.S. when I was 5, and then we went back and forth between Hungary, like I believe more than 12 times in my childhood. So basically, all this thing around really made me interested in kind of the differences between the one and different places, but also the similarities. There are cultural differences, but there are human similarities that we all share. So that's where this topic kind of came from that I'll talk about today. One thing I noticed when I was moving back and forth during elementary school and high school is very different feedback culture between the two countries. So in Hungary, you don't get praise very much. It's not common to get encouragement to praise or positive feedback like that. So when I first came to the US, I was kind of shocked by teachers giving me praise for projects and things, and I really liked it. So I became very interested in why that is, why is the culture so different, and how does that affect in their success in life. So I wanted to start by asking all of you, actually, kind of a quick poll. If you're thinking about, let's say you're facing some task that you what's ahead of you, like running a marathon or writing an essay or whatever it is that you imagine. I want you to think about what motivates you. And in fact, I would like to ask you to raise your hand and say, I'm going to list things and raise your hand if you're motivated by it. So, do you feel like you're motivated by encouragement? Someone gives you. Wow. What about praise? People love praise. What about negative feedback? Well, right. So, yeah, there's usually some people. Competition. That nice yes there. I said publicity. What I meant is like public acknowledgement, publicly rewarded. I guess I have a follow-up question. I don't know if the setting and like for this kind of discussion, but I guess I was wondering, have you ever been, can you remember a time when someone motivated you or didn't involve? Or was nice. But if you put your cards to hear me, what that number. So, have you ever had an experience where someone said a few words to you, get to feedback on your life, and it really mattered a lot? Changed your, I don't know if anyone wants to share where this was.
Anytime, so I could.
So he was actually my class last quarter, and I know that for a fact because sometimes I got stuck on Excel stuff, and you're the one who fixed it. Yeah, that's true. Anyone else? Any teacher? Well, I guess I'll tell you about your self-learning. And wow. I guess I'll tell you about one of my experiences. So, like I said, in Hungary, I really get lots and encouragement from teachers or anything like that. And when I've been studying in Seattle, my professor somehow loved the essay I wrote and really encouraged me to go on studying. I had a PhD. And it kind of felt like my salt was a desert. Finally, I was reading and I started flourishing. I was seeing words of encouragement. So I think sometimes one experience like that, one person could really impact their career in life in a big way. So that's why I became interested in this feedback topic. But one thing that's clear is people that are doing stuff like this. So I decided to have quick goal here. All I want to do is provide that. So we get to kind of imagine a scenario. Imagine that you're starting your new job. And your boss immediately asks you to choose some kind of very difficult class. This is also something I experienced when I started my first research assistant position. My boss there gave me, 10 weeks long program from analyzing data. And I literally didn't understand any of it. So it was kind of throwing in the deep end kind of thing. So in this kind of situation, what do you think would motivate you better? All of this, or something more like this? Risky, whether you like in this. Or maybe uh, I guess the point is a little mistake there, but what I was trying to make is it really depends on a lot of things. What feedback affects you most positively? And so this all depends on yourself, what kind of personal preferences you have, like what you respond to, which is shaped by your nature versus where I don't want was a big. It also depends on the sense that you're listening. So um, if you are trying to do a task that you feel possible, maybe you're okay with competition, maybe it's a task that you're really nervous about, maybe you some encouragement. Well, it depends on that too. It depends how you best. So it's good to be like what kind of relationship if they encourage you, you can learn what not and things like that. So kind of the point I was trying to make is to think about it, different people need different feedback at different times to motivate. And this includes, feedback might help make it fall. It might increase confidence in certain situations, or make you interested in helping and get something. So I like to think of this kind of like play. And every type of plant, you see your cactus or, things like that. They all have different amounts of water with different amounts of sunlight. In different seasons, they need different amounts of water as well. So it's kind of very interesting and kind of varies what kind of need that is supposed to. In our this is especially true. Pretty awful for groups that have been mistalked when we find the representatives of desert occupation or fields or activities, right? The examples that come to my mind that I hear about a lot in my line of research where there's not as many Jews students and leadership. And in these situations, these groups, have maybe line models to look up to or that is examples, less of the network, less of the knowledge of hidden options. How do we navigate that? What about that? You don't have parents to tell you about it. They have less experience, and usually this leads to less thought and then to maybe lower expectations. So, this topic of feedback, and I realize this is particularly important when we're talking about these kinds of individuals. So I did want to clarify what I mean by feedback. There's many ways to find that, and everything will supply has different ways. What I am talking about here is verbal communication that you receive from a supervisor during it. Whenever this, when of course in reality feedback is it right now as I seem smile or that one by charts feedback right? Positive. Or if I see students in my class falling asleep, something, right? We're here to focus on your advice. And there's many types of feedback. I've done it, so I'm an economist, but I've done into different disciplines almost talking. And there's all kinds of terminology being used, and it's not standardized between the field and the ball, but you can think about positive, negative feedback, descriptive or action, feedback about your performance or your effort or your growth, objective or subjective feedback. So there's really a lot of types. And there's a lot of previous research, speaking psychology and education, and human resource management about the impact of different feedback types, including source of the feedback, frequency of feedback. Well, so you create someone every minute, maybe it becomes less effective after a while, things like that. And the context of feedback. So when is it perceived as sincere? When does it really impact you? Or when you just ignore it? What we do in our projects that I will show you here is we focus on the impact of subjective feedback. And what I mean by that is encouragement. So words that express a positive expectation about your future performance, and praise, which is about your past performance, positive evaluation of past. So the overall bigger goal of this research project series, as I realized as we went along, is really to kind of make a case to the about the fact that this is important. So I think that everyone can agree that one of our goals of our society is to sort of try to allow individuals to be as productive as they can. And economists would say that's how we maximize the societal pie, right? And like I was explaining, in previous research, feedback works better if it's personal. Because people around every day to get their conversation. And this is something that with teachers and engineers, there's many parenting that are about how you nurture your child and give them the type of feedback that helps them, things like that. And yet, if we think about it, it's not common practice. So there's about workplaces. I don't want any more specific properties. Maybe you hear about property culture being kind of forward thought and negative. The attitude looks if you can't cut it, you should be on it. That kind of attitude. Well, from an economic point of view, what people are understanding the benefits of taking the time to pay attention to their officials and figure out what they need and get like that, right? So it's a costly thing to do to take the time and learn what people need. So I think at this point, economists and many managers or teachers are not convinced that the benefit outweighs the cost. So quite often this kind of work, this kind of personalized attention, for example, student needs, kind of undervalued and uncompensated. So, excuse me. I know, for example, my research institute, and I also work at a research institute in Hungary, which I think is some of us now. And they have a performance evaluation system where nothing. One of the times you have lunch training, Gavin research or anything like that is taught to anyone. And certain people do a lot of that work with no recognition. That does not get promoted. In fact, it hinders you if you spend time away. And I think that's true for a lot of academic institutions that really focus on systemic type research out there. And maybe it's not considered as important about how much they manage stalls. Just so I could speak for my field and economics. If you look at literature, or generally psychological factors like that are not considered teams and employees. And also individual differences are not considered so important. So in economics, you have usually models that build on models of path individuals name positions. They're mostly based on financial, right? And they don't, you like the workplace depends on where point, but also depends on a little bit of and that's not considered less much. So basically, that was kind of our goal, is to give quantitative evidence or empirical evidence about the importance of this topic. and specifically how important it is to personalize thinking. So I think that this is a business case for lessons into this. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, smaller class sizes. Some people still very more seriously have smaller class sizes, teachers in large schools every state, and put them a little more personalized attention. Which we take with other things too, like I said, in performance evaluations, improving that, including time spent doing this kind of work and so on. And also hiring practices. So when you're hiring people, do you care about if they're good at this kind of management that they are. So in this study of experiment I'm about to show you, we focus on gender differences. There's two main reasons for that. One is these are projects that we did in Central and Eastern Europe. So my co-authors, my co-authors were from Poland and Czech Republic. So racial differences, they're really, they're not applicable to those countries. They don't exist in those countries. Gender differences, however, are very kind of traditional norms. The other reason is there's a lot of literature on the topic of gender differences in labor market, yeah, and in educational outcomes like the low ratio of women in so in literature, there's a lot of documentation with differences by gender and psychological traits. One of the ones that is highlighted very often is about competitiveness. So there's a lot of studies that show and experiments in real life data that women choose competitive tasks or settings or fields less often. And there's also a set of that shows that they perform weaker upper competitive settings. So the question is, what can be done? So my personal experience was that I think competitiveness is very much malleable traits. So when I was from Hungary, I used to go here and talk competitive. While my memory was kind of that world on supports. I cannot compete with others. So I do believe this is a cultural difference. So it's not set in stone. Whatever these things measure, it can be changed, right? And so one approach in the literature is the fixed institutions approach. The other approach is called fixed women, which I don't go with so much. But the fixed institution approach recognizes that maybe there's elements or institutional system that are favoring certain traits, certain preferences that maybe men have more than women. So, as an example, if you have a workplace where everything's based on competition, and if women have lower qualities that are less willing to compete to begin with, for whatever reason, then this is one statistic they can solve that, right? They're not going to get those promotions. So there's this studies looking into that. For example, then we'll work on student teaching, integrate self-grading, spending, maybe use less competition-based ratings and validation, less like that. Well, women. There's studies about quota style policy. Of course, these are very popular things. But maybe if you women will lead the competition, then next generation will see them as well because I think they choose to go into leadership in the future. And it becomes a lot of fun objective there. What I mean by that is that are basically relative performance feedback, like in a higher education setting, and what telling students their percentile rank while in science, like that. So you're in the 90%. And what I show it is on that high ability minimum, if they're given more relative performance feedback, so they find out blinding on they'll find more some kind of needle push. So they might underestimate these often it helps sort of raise the confidence. So it just in my research, we wanted to and add on to that, what about this pain body? Because really, when you get someone feedback, most of the time we're supposed to get one in here. Follow it fine, I'm going to respond and negative for it's out loud. And so we felt this on encouragement. And the method being, so we did a series of randomized experiments. Basically, we developed a simple online game. And I'm not saying it's not the part, being in the place, it's not bad. I'll show you a picture in a second. And the players play the game, and they were reading selected into groups. And then what they read was what feedback messages gave out while they were playing. So this is what was our treatments. And this we looked at how did those messages impact how many days people play, persistent, and what score did they achieve, which is for art. So this is a very similar setup to any drug product, right? So you have treatment software. Hopefully you have a better look seeing with people that support that's when experiments working well. Because if there's hard things, you have to treatment for example, solving where areas are ordering every way. Say number planning and say number older number so on. And the only thing that differs between the two groups in a trial of this, the treatment is for anyone crowd and the control group, right? And then any difference that you find afterwards can be attributed to the crowd. So the experiment is better than if there's a big enough stand code. This is a big good way to establish causality with the growth with something. Our setting is very similar, which is a big emphasis to the fact. A lot less paperwork. So this is what the game looks. Well, actually, this is the landing page. So we made the website with the game on it. And then we advertise that on social media. And I do see selection because initially we wanted to put out data worldwide. Very soon we realized that Americans do not split our links like that. So, people here are more used to social media and more used to getting targeted by ads, like our links like that. So we ended up focusing on our multi-country, our essentially center. What people do still with our ads appearing. So that's where most of our sample is from, and we've limited our sample to 18 to 45. So basically, if people clicked on the link, they landed on this page. They were then asked to fill out a very brief survey. Now, this is a big decision for us. We wanted to do this. So our whole idea was we didn't want them to be like they're taking part in the experiment. We wanted them to feel like they were just playing a game and not any job or choose it, we're being served, things like that. So we didn't want there's a whole bunch of questions that we would love to collect data on, but we ended up deciding to keep it simple. I think, any gaming websites really basic information, but we asked for age, gender, country, education level, and there were two questions here: how do you play games, online games, and how quickly people are at the well, this were the ones we threw in because we were really interested in what but we simple put in long-winded psychological questionnaire like that. So this is what the game looks like. I wanted to show it to you live, but it's actually not running right now. But it's basically a screen where there's a bunch of shapes in the crowns on a double screen. And there's a target shape up here with water. And you just have to click on the shapes and match the pattern. And once you click on all of them, you're getting started. And there's always new shapes coming into. So it's very simple. I don't call it a game of visual perception. And people have a total of 2 minutes to click on like as many shapes. You get my wife for every shape. Click for it. So very simple. And then this is what the message would look like. This was a pilot experiment. So sometimes during the shape change, you would get a message. And the content, this would pop up on your screen. This is what we varied the change control and big words. So this, for example, was phrase. And for the control, it will be saying 2 targets needed without the good shot in the there. So I'll show you the results. Externally for all ring stars and varied content. So the first part, this was a pilot experiment. We just wanted to see the little effect of subjective feedback by a film. And so we had 3 groups here. It's all got enough subjective feedback. It's just that 2 quarters. The first 3 groups was the praise messages like the one we just saw. And the second treatment will receive encouraging messages. At this point, we're using other response money for this experiment, like firing designer, and all that. So we kept it simple, but shockingly, it's 12 led to significant. I think I would just love the problem on this. Apparently, they are along with steps. So this is just to give you an idea. So the control group didn't get any such content, just more information. The praise for the very good job, well done on your grades. The encouragement was at the time throughout the game, so are you ready to walk? You could do it, keep it up, you're almost there. That was it. Here are the results. So in this first experiment, we had 869 players. Which is the second. A lot of it is you'll see in our follow-up experiments. And when you can see here is so this is the time, the 2-minute time for day. And these lines show the source of the small group. Okay. So so this red line up here, for example, this is the X or women who receive encouragement. And you can see that over time, this went above the average slot of incremental light. So at the end of the game, it was about 4.5 points higher than the score of the control, which was 32 points, by the way. So I think that's about 15%. And of course, sets, and these are statistical things like people there by the end of the game. So to guidance represent men who see convergent family extending praise. It was basically not like that to feedback as to so they're on the very but for see encouragement and a very positive impact and maybe surprisingly based on the impact. But we got into that psychology literature after that, we did find that sometimes like based expression on people, or it might be regarded as insincere. Like if you don't think you're doing well with someone's good job, it's giving it parts. So maybe that was pretty well. But that was kind of our initial results. Now we did it. As you saw in the video, we asked people how good people are, like it's as a game. And if we the data from that, we can see that generally men were walked down to the mentally before they described one. So we can see men were more likely to say excellent, women were more likely to say they'll be pretty bad out of the very. And the interesting thing is, if you look at our main result, we rated it up by confidence level. really what we saw by those who had low confidence. So we defined that as people who feel very bad or really bad. Oh, so we didn't all high confidence. And if those people had lower confidence again, among those people, actually men responded and they can spread it. So what this told us is these is not related to gender difference and when those are the feedback, it's just gender difference and how we respond to the feedback when we come. Right? So at this point, when I'm presenting this research at any conference, anywhere, let's see, so this meeting, that we should target that region. Is that what we're saying? And I see this your feedback that no, it's not really a part of conclusion at all. And I don't want our research to be misunderstood to suggest that. What we think the results show is I think it's somewhat personalized. In this experiment, it seemed like positive based on products, right? But we do show that if you give people want feedback, that could exacerbate you into that, right? So if you're studying growing or confidence and you talk well, sequencing that might make it things on everything else. So really what we're arguing for based on its results, more representation and with that problem. And there's an economic fix to be made here. So as we saw, even in the pre-programmed messages, or not female supervisor, the feedback messages have a big impact. So, of course, this is speculation, but you might think that in the long-term relationship loss, where the stakes are higher in your job, the big light button. So yeah, so basically you would only be that in recent quality. So in the start experiment, we decided to go further and really try to link feedback to these previous findings about competitive language. So if it's true that competitive studies participants in financial slide, because shown, so they respond less well to that and again in the following. We were wondering maybe support feedback on the council that. So maybe it's people are nervous about something wrong, but you think when they take over upon that, maybe fall out. Because nervous they can recall what's the funds, the little stress. There's a whole other trouble. So what we're interested in here is interaction. So is that what's a new one on the field, but part of that, we had 8 treatment groups. It's a little hard to choose which we call solving, so I was solving in 8 groups. Basically, the people, so they were playing the same game. As the people were not showing holding their word, at least more young, they watched on one even word, within each pose, there were pointer alignment and support patterns. Some people got no feedback. Some people got supportive feedback, which is basically the encouragement. And now we did daily our right? At this point, we got funding, so video design. There was minority feedback, which is great. And we did add a fourth feedback on trash bombs, which I heard. So I've actually seen studies about this in the fall of synthetic there's the chart, right? And we added that because while we were, anyone who knows the game word, it's a game. We got that that's like the swamps running acrylic. We wanted to add that. And also when we were testing our initial experiment, some work is recent, we decided to add that, but as you will see in the result, I don't think we did we weren't good at starting. This low right down here, you can see the trash spout that we wanted. And yes, we're going to get done. It's really having to get that. It was hard to come up with it. But we didn't want to lay on either. But you can see here the 8 groups and all the messages named out without activity 5. So here's the results of this experiment. So what I'm showing here is we just focus on the first 3 columns. So with dark, we missed the average score of May. And the light is average score of November. And this is the general standard, which comes in statistical significance. This is the case where there was no uniform no. So we call this the baseline view. All that again, but I'm fun and then I'll get started. It's fun baseline. But so what this is telling us is that there's no clear book that when actually with an average higher else if our sample hurts. And I forgot to mention that in this experiment we got all types of this good. This is where I hear your data person. So compared to that, constant that if there's some belt feedback that was shown a little bit larger. It meant quality sheet is significant. So we'll but competition in our game. On the other hand, units that were considered and just for the shown. However, you show the leaderboard is getting support and that's of encouraging words. Notice that units one and increase better case one was about certain either compares what our hypothesis was really incorrect. Maybe that an idea of actually no twice. On the other hand, if you look at that, the hard columns, so here we have our later one where you feedback with the block and rewarding that later for the trash off, and you can see that basically if there's competition, that's a woman thing in our center. So it didn't matter what kind of feedback they got, they didn't get feedback at any one thing, different trash, which Garrett could probably avoid. On the other hand, for with them, you don't see a change just competition, but when it is paired with feedback, supported feedback, then their performance gains increase. So again, the conclusion, similarly to the last project, was finding individual technological feedback based and often if you have supervising, it's better to individualize your feedback than on feedback and it will help with the performance of certain people. It'll help with the performance as a whole and it better increase. Again, we're trying to make a business case. So the big question now is which effect before it arrive. Now, you are getting consumer small and like that, right? So some supervisors with it knowing what people need, some people might allow me that. But what was really interesting is we were writing this paper, we were writing it up during the pandemic. And a doctor, they're reading, she was on like on set. It was a panel. And so suddenly they were using what I'm going to add as a preview saw. And I saw the credit and they kind of gave us a very obvious application for research. And it made us realize that there's a whole lot of research going on in software development where they're collecting data on students and administrators and trying to target their that, figuring out exactly what we're talking about, what makes students click, what we're keep actually doing math problems longer, what will want them to be more. So we kind of stumbled on, or not stumbled, we were also to realize that there's a lot of interesting applications here to AI and maps and stuff. I don't my one that is um that's the needs and that kind of software it could be now it's not very terms of school, they're not but great during the pandemic. And I think it's kind of cheap if that actually teaches time to get that information. It would be nice to see it. It will be integrated. All right, so I only have one more left. So you back some other returns. Peter, we're interested in okay, we shoot people, so there's not feedback, no subjective feedback yet. We're just sharing about these nice scoreboards that we're playing with this. And we had and what we wouldn't see in general composition that was whatever but our people's like this. So again the system global names were and the recognizable at the worldwide. We had a scoreboard where putting one's name, 2 men and 1 woman, 2 women and 1 people. And so they were fortunate people were rather left to be on this power. And what we found was that we then played more games. Practicing women played less games when it was only an end of the sport. They also achieved higher scores when at least one woman's name appeared amongst sport. So it seemed to have an important second content if they saw at least one woman's name on scoreboard that was surely fun. And it kind of relates to so in space full model that and all this switching was all and a lot of these stuff and maybe if they're looking at a name like this with these scoreboard, you know, if you want to say men, we're not identifying with that. So I mean, like, not even what if there were women on serving that became significant to women? And kind of place the world character robot of this one though. Like, and it's given the students the relationships so well like that find very tricky. So we that gracefully still in progress. Our cool. And so we show, like I said, the fact that we show that I need to love to interaction with out of states instead of the fact that in seeing it back into the specifically based on bond and support field. And so we think that personalized impact is like gold. And it's one thing that's in that program issue setting sauce. I think it's like there's always a lot of support to do. So I will love to extend this research to the future to obviously and ended with their feedback. And one of the getting those things on this like that we keep my name and we'll question our extreme is applies to a real life work like that. And of course we can't but on the other hand, this woman allows elect people standards really have their needs that manipulation. So it's kind of a trade-off. But it would be interesting to tell and you around in books. Um, yeah, and one thing I realized is this is definitely a interdisciplinary topic. So when we presented in systemology or either we always hopefully learn about a much terminology we don't know and theories to grow. So I forget to add that I also want to extend in my age. So for example, my daughter in this English to chemicals she played she marries and she's not and like that even a 2-year-old was well messages so we get true yeah and so thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. Do you have any questions? Okay, answer.
Going to give Anna a break for a second. We'll give away some prizes, and then we'll have to take a few minutes to ask some questions. Prize I have to give that away. You were had a chance to actually get out and wrapping tickets, so I'm gonna do it really quick. Back. Look where at. Keep the one that's going to win that. Oh. Like the hot. And people should probably want to know what you're going to win. It's to help clean up afterwards. For those of you who haven't been here, the Think and Drink tubes are now coming almost into season. So for now, it was just stylish to have one during the summertime. Now it's actually functional. It would tell. The glasses. Oh, and I just got back from Egypt, so I'm 10 hours off. And so, first winner is last three numbers are 125. 125. Hey, coming at you. You girl in the slides. All right. 116. 116. Hey, this seems since you're that's the end daughter game. To choose which one. So again, just a reminder that October 10th is our next talk, and it will be about something archaeology in Egypt. That's all I know at this point. We'll get more details to be up on the website. I also I did, if you hadn't signed up, there's a listserv that's now available. So if you want to get word, I think somebody might have gotten word because you put your name on it last time. But if you did not, if you email me at jimgowell@uw.edu, which I had on the other screen, but I lost it. I can give you my card and you can you can email me and I can get you onto the thing so you get the notices about these talks every. Good. I had a QR code. I felt so darn hip about it, and I took it off the street. So